Hello YouTube, my name is Spalding Space and I'm going to be doing another Star Wars Legends book review on Star Wars, The Rule of Two. Now this is the 10th event in the Legends timeline and is the second book in the Darth Bane trilogy. Now warning, there are going to be some spoilers for the first book, Darth Bane Path of Destruction, which I have done a review on, which I will link right over there, or whichever side it happens to be on. So if you haven't read that book, I highly recommend that you do, and come back and watch that review, and then watch this review once you've read this book. But there aren't going to be any spoilers for the first half. I'm just going to sort of talk about general thoughts and things without spoiling anything. And then for the second half, I'm going to sort of analyze what I thought about the book. When I like to read books, I like to watch reviews before and after I've read it, just so I can see if I really want to read it. And then afterwards, just sort of thoughts and see what other people liked about the book. So, spoilers for book one. Where the book leaves off is that you could read the first book straight into the second, and it's like the blink of an eye. It takes off right where you've left at the end of the first book, right after the Battle of Ruusan, where Bane runs into Rain, who goes by Xana later in the book. So he takes her as an apprentice, instituting the Rule of Two, obviously, and the book follows a lot of different protagonists, as is normal in a lot of Caperson's writing. He did the same thing in Dynasty of Evil, and I have Revan over here, and of course, this book. So you follow Bane. Xana, who is his apprentice, is one of the protagonists. A new character, a Jedi named Johan, and Darovit, who is Rey's cousin. All of these characters are super well developed, even though they're new. I was sort of worried about it when I was reading. I was like, who is this Johan guy? But he is Lord Hoth's apprentice, and Farfalla is still in the book because obviously it happens right after the Thought Bomb, which I still think is a stupid name, destroys about like 100 Jedi and all of the Sith. So now Bane is the Dark Lord of the Sith. So that's sort of where the book starts off. So what did I like about the book? Well, I liked how it connected directly off of the first. It was really interesting. It was just kind of like reading a whole... It was just like, oh, here's the next chapter. But something I didn't really like, and this also happened in the third book, is, and I understand the point for it, but I kind of don't at the same time, is that after having finished the first book, you obviously know everything that has happened, right? You're like, okay, Githany, okay, I know about the Thought Bomb, I know about Bane, I know how he grew up, I know all this stuff. But it restates it very heavily from the first to the second book. Like, it restates it a lot at the beginning of the second book, and I'm like, yeah, I already know that. I just finished the first book. So I felt like it was unneeded. Like, well, why do I need a refresher, even though I've just read that book? And I mean, it came out, I think, like 6 months after the first book did, so it wasn't like it was many years and people had forgotten what happened. But I read it like the day after I finished the first book, so it was definitely sort of like, okay, now I'm just getting another refresher. But the characters, what did I think? Bane, obviously, is fantastic. I love Bane's character. I had a problem with Rain in the first third of the book, kind of. I think it's the first third, is when she's 10 years old. Now, her story is super interesting. I love Rain and Rosanna as a character. I think she's fantastic. But as a 10-year-old, and I mentioned this briefly in my first review, she's very sadistic, and it seems like she just hops on the dark side train really quickly. The thing I really loved about Bane's character was that when he was Dez, you know, he had elements of anger and rage, and you could kind of see the way he would be a Sith, but it was done really well. I really applaud Caperson's way of making the character of Dez really, you know, morph into Bane. But I felt like with Rain, she was already like, all right, let's do it. All right, I'm going to break some people's necks. I'm going to shoot a bunch of people. I'm going to kill everyone in sight. Like, and you'll know when you read it, is very sudden. It's very, very jarring. And a lot of her training is so like sort of the first third of the book, first 100 pages are when she's 10, and then it skips 10 years later. And I kind of wish that I could see her be trained more and see her turn. Like, I wish she was more innocent at the beginning, and then I would believe her character. I mean, once it jumps 10 years, I'm like, okay, I get it. She's been trained by Bane. I wish we would have seen the training more. But something I really liked that Caperson did was he had a lot of flashbacks when, you know, it was her story and whatever, and she was, I guess at that point, like 20. It would do a flashback to when she was 12 or 14 and Bane was teaching her a lesson that would be applicable to the current situation. So I loved those flashbacks. I just wish that maybe they were more a part of the book. I felt like part of Xana's stuff, especially near the beginning when she turns 20, is like not needed. Like it could be used somewhere else. So that was my only problem with Xana. Otherwise, great character. Johan, I really liked his character. It's, again, I mentioned the same thing with Hoth, is it's not a stereotypical Jedi. He's not a normal Jedi, and I really enjoyed that viewpoint. Again, with Darovit, he is the cousin of Rain, and his character is super interesting as well, because he was a Jedi, and then he was a Sith, and now he's just kind of like nothing, and his character is super, super interesting because of his feelings for Rain. So all of that culminated in the end of the book. Notice I'm not spoiling anything yet. In this really, 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 really awesome, it was just really cool. I can't explain it. I don't want to spoil anything yet, but I highly recommend that you read this book if you haven't done so yet. So the characters are just fantastic. If you love Caperson's writing style, as I did throughout the first book and his other books, you'll love this one as well. It's a little bit shorter than the first book. I think it's around 320, no, not even, like 300 like 12 pages or something like that. So it definitely wasn't as long as the first one, by like 40 pages. I knocked this book out in like 2 days, so it won't take you that long to finish. Okay, now I'm going to go into spoilers. So if you haven't read the book, go off, read this book, it's fantastic, and then come back and watch this. So I'm going to get into sort of more of what I thought. Okay, the end was so freaking good. It reminded me of like Breaking Bad, or like a really fantastic show where, because, Rain picks up Darovit from Coruscant, and then Johan and Farfalla and all these awesome Jedi have a battle on Tython, which is really interesting because when they mentioned Tython, and I'm a huge Star Wars The Old Republic player, I was, imagining Tython to look a certain way, but it looked totally different. I mean, it has been 1,000 years since the Star Wars The Old Republic game took place. But, yeah, it looked totally different. And their lightsaber fight between Xana, Bane, and then all the other Jedi, including Johan, was so awesome. So that was fantastic. Then, at the end, when they fooled the rest of the Jedi into thinking Darovit was actually the last Sith, was really awesome. And another thing I loved, and I'll get to that later in the third book, is the reincorporation of characters that you sort of thought were just one-offs in the first book into the second and third book. So the character of Caleb is utilized again to heal Bane's problem with the Orbalists, which I thought was so cool. Oh my gosh, the description of the Orbalists and their lore and their power and everything, I thought was so cool. I even got the Orbalisk armor set in Star Wars The Old Republic, which looks awesome. But I thought that when Caleb was brought back to heal Bane once more, even after he did the first time in the first book, it was super interesting, and you really get a feeling for Xana's ability with deception and cunning, and you can see, wow, okay, one day she's really gonna stand out against Bane, and that's gonna be a really awesome rivalry, which we'll get to in the third book. No spoilers. So yeah, that ending where she tricked the Jedi was just so cool, and to show that she would just sacrifice her own cousin like that. And the last few lines where she's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna kill you, Bane." That was fantastic. I love that, absolutely. Some of the things I didn't like were some of her story with the Twi'lek when she was talking about overthrowing the Chancellor, which I know that she wasn't actually trying to because it was Bane's plan, but the thing that I didn't really like, and it's never really explained throughout the book, and the next book as well, are Bane's plans, like why he wants the Separatists, and he says to distract from them, but it just doesn't seem very long term. Like, I just wish that it had been explained more, but it didn't really gel with me that much. And then I wish that there were more flashbacks with Xana because her character just doesn't seem developed when she's 10. When it moves on, definitely. But it just seems like the way she was written in the epilogue from the first book it was just so quick, and I think that's because, if you didn't know, I mentioned it in the first one, but the first Bane book was supposed to be just a one-off, and then they wanted him to write sequels, so maybe he just thought, I don't have to do much with Xana's character, and then when he was writing the sequel, he's like, okay, now I just have a sadistic 10-year-old on my hands. Which brings me to the next scene with her, which I thought was fantastic, where she kills that family and the pilot in the shuttle to Onderon. I thought was really great. Yeah, overall, it was a fantastic book. So if I were to rate this book out of 10, I would give it a 9.8 I would say it's better than the first book, honestly, because the ending was just fantastic. I mean, I would say it was better than the first book because it was just a really awesome culmination of all these storylines intersecting to make a really fantastic ending. There was sort of the first, semblance of ending on Tython. That was the ending of Johan's story because, they killed him. And then Darovit on whatever the planet is, starts with an A, where Caleb lives. That was fantastic. So 9.7, final score. I highly recommend that you read this book. It is fantastic. And later I will do a review on the third and final book out of the Darth Bane trilogy, and then start working on sort of the other Old Republic books. And then once I finish Plagueis, I will do one on that. So go out, pick this book up from curbside Barnes & Noble, give it a read, let me know what you think, and have a fantastic day.